This evening, our speaker is deaf historian and educator Kathleen Brockway. She is currently a doctoral student at Lamar University in Texas, where she focuses on deaf communities, cultural sustainability, and ethical preservation practices. She is the author of two publications, Baltimore's Deaf Heritage in 2014 and Detroit's Deaf Heritage in 2016. She's also contributed to Virginia Encyclopedia with an entry on the shared Shenandoah County signing community you will hear about this evening. And she has a forthcoming entry in the Oregon Encyclopedia on the shared signing community there in Harrisburg, Oregon. With a master's degree in cultural sustainability from Goucher College and a graduate certificate in deaf cultural studies from Gallaudet University, Kathleen integrates academic research with public-facing work. Through her Heritage ASL platforms on Instagram and Facebook, she continues to educate and inspire by uncovering and sharing untold stories within deaf history. For those of you just joining us, welcome. I am pleased to start our conversation on Bridging Two Counties, the shared signing community of Shenandoah and Rockingham, by welcoming our guest, Kathleen Brockway.
Hello, thank you. I will go ahead and begin to share screen. Is it time? Okay. All right, just making sure my interpreter can see me. So I have a blurred background, and I have a couple things in my background of my image, such as my grandfather clock, and you can see the entryway to another room in my background. And the reason why I'm using the blurred background is because some of those items might be a little distracted, and I am on the road right now. Um, and so I just wanted to this is the best room I could find at the moment. More continuing my visual description, I have a mix of purple and gray patterned um, on my clothes with yellow hair and blue glasses, shoulder length hair. So I am excited to be here with you all tonight on this topic of bridging two counties, the Shenandoah County and the Rockingham County. And this is a really exciting topic. This information is really an honor to share with you all tonight. I'm honored to be invited to speak as we have celebrated the 250th anniversary of Rockingham County, and previous to that was the 250th anniversary to Shenandoah County. So congratulations on those milestones. So you might be wondering about the phrase a shared signing community. It's the equivalent to what we would call a deaf village, where there was an exchange of sign language between hearing and deaf individuals among the community. And the majority of people in these communities use sign language. And that word majority meant that's how people communicated. And folks outside of those areas typically did not use sign language. So we call these places, villages. And what you see on the screen are images of some of the people in that community, but not all of them. So these are some of the faces that we know about in the record out of um, out of several collections of images that we are very fortunate to have passed down. And these are valuable documents of deaf history, tremendously important. And these are artifacts, among others, and
Weston,
being able to see people's faces is really tremendous.
Weston, can I interrupt?
One, yes, I can hear you.
I do apologize. I apologize for the delay. And now, so you see this map here. This map is between Shenandoah and Rockingham. So you can see that there in the placement. And if you see this spot, there is Stanton and then Edinburgh. So you have the yellow dot and the red dot. And so Stanton is where the Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind is located. So that is the town of Stanton that was established in 1839. And in Edinburgh, that is where the Deaf Village, also known as Lantz Mills, was located in Edinburgh. So as you see on the map, it's right off of the 81, off of the interstate highway. You can see the exit of Edinburgh, and then as soon as you get off of that exit, about 1.5 miles out, you will arrive at Lantz Mills, which is very close by. It's right over the cliff from Union Forge, excuse me. And you can see that Singer's Glen is right in the middle. And then we've got Linville. And so that is where there was a deaf community. And in Singer's Glen, you would find some of the members there. In Linville, it was the surrounding area where there used to be train transportation in the area. So now I'm going to go ahead and explain more about Edinburgh, as you see here on the map. So Union Forge Cemetery was the first, right, as you can see, it's the first photo up here in the PowerPoint. There was at least 26 deaf individuals identified who were buried there. And that may seem like a small number, but to the deaf community, that's actually considered a very large number to us. Because we are such a small community all throughout the United States. And below that is another cemetery, and that is it's the Hollar. And there's about 11 individuals buried there that were identified. And both of them were about 4 miles apart. So in between you will find these cemeteries. And this was related to the family out in Rockingham. So let me go ahead and move over to the next slide. So now I want to take an opportunity to elaborate a bit more before I move forward with the Rockingham history. So we want to recognize Lantz Mills, which is a deaf-owned business. It's true, there were 3 different generations in the same family, all of the last names by Christian. And as you can see here on the photo at the top right corner, that is the building where the wood shop was located. It was a very beautiful wood shop at the top of the cliff. And right when you look over, you'd be able to see the river. And that lower area, on the lower land, that was considered as the cliff, which would then guide you over to the Union Forge Cemetery. So it was an entryway, if you will. And so you could see their old farmland and their home at High Bluff. Now, High Bluff there are 3 different parts. There was the lower land, which was flat, and the water would wash up. And then as you progressed more up on the land, it then became an island, and it was more elevated, which looked like it was an island. And the reason why it looked that way was because there was 2 creeks that would meet one another, that would surround this land. And through many generations, the deaf community would identify it as an island, which was puzzling. But I later found that it was because of the 2 creeks that created this landscape that was similar to a island. Now, High Bluff was a business run organization, and you can see the publication on the bottom right of this PowerPoint, and it was established in 1877. Now, in 1877, that is when they began their farmland out in High Bluff. So you can see there's a gentleman, the photo of William at the upper left corner. William was the first owner, so William Christian, and he worked on this farm with hogs, with wheat, with stalls, and blacksmithing. He worked with horses. There were a lot of horses. And then the land was about 94 acres. And there was a barn that was set in place. And that barn is still there till this day. And it is very beautiful. It's such a beautiful barn. It's amazing to think, that at least it's about 40 feet of wood panels that I just never recognized. And I just couldn't believe how they managed to find a way to create this construction without anything hindering it. And they managed to build this barn up by 40 feet. And the establishment of the barn, when it first opened, is still there. It's been signed in, and that's how signatures used to be. Now, if you look over at the second photo of John Jacob, he was the one who decided to purchase the land. So he's the son of William, and he purchased it much more further up in High Bluff. It is hard to see, but there was a house that's right at the left side of this photo where the building shop is established. And so the photo, when you look at it, kind of looks like a White House. It's 2 stories. And that was purchased back in 1890. So the wood shop was created in 1890. And then they started to move into the barn, or excuse me, from the barn and into this location to specialize in furniture and with undertaking furniture. So caskets and so forth. Now, it would either be wood art or rough box.
Walnut.
Walnut, excuse me, thank you. Walnut. And so there is a nice transcript that's uploaded to the Encyclopedia of Virginia that states this. Now, he passed away back in 1915, and this establishment continued then to John Jacob, who was his son. And then came the 3rd generation of Horace, as you can see pictured here in this PowerPoint. And he continued to run this business. And so we're looking at about 80 years of ownership. And then he died in 1960, in the 1960s. So again, I have a map. And so just explaining a bit more about Singer's Glen Cemetery and when it was established, which was in 1826, as you can see here. In Linville, you can see that it's the Linville Depot where they lived in the area, the deaf community. That's where you would find the post office and pick up mail. And that was considered as a transit area and postal office. And what I found, which was really interesting, was how it was connected to the Lantz Mill. And you will be surprised. Let me just share that here with you in just a moment. So as you can see here on the left, now this is my favorite story. It's a love story. And
Cross counties.
Across counties. And you can see that there is a gentleman here by the name of Berlin. And they worked at the Stanton School for the Deaf and Blind. He was a laborer and would send postcards to a coda, which is a child of a deaf adult. And by her name is Ida, and she's hearing, but both of her parents are deaf, who are from Lantz Mills. So it was really incredible to see how the postcards would share a story. And through generations, it was saved. And so there was a handful of postcards that just really was heartwarming. And this was passed on to their deaf children. The postcards are really powerful. It tells a story, especially it was right before a month before they got married, and Ida had warned to her father that he would be, that he might get upset because the two of them planned to get married. And I had wondered why. And I suspect that it was, and I haven't confirmed it, but with the history, obviously, through genealogy, they may have been cousins. And so they got married and they lived out in Rockingham County, which was close to Linville. And here on this PowerPoint it says marriage as a human bridge. Now this is Ida's family photoed here, and her father is also in this picture, and her mother, who is also deaf, has a hard of hearing brother, and I think one of them, her siblings, might be hearing. I'm not entirely sure. They may be hard of hearing, but basically, it was a full signing family, and on the grounds of the lower land with around two houses that were occupied by two deaf families. And they had codas, children of deaf adults. So you can just imagine on that street how they would interact with one another, and they would have their hands up signing to one another, and just be able to mingle. I mean, to think of that, it was just really heartwarming, and it was considered as the deaf street. So you can see the picture here. There's a picture of a woman, Charity Reedy Warrington, and she actually is currently the interim superintendent of the Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. And she is the granddaughter of Ida and Berlin. So she is, again, the granddaughter to Berlin and Ida, and she has such a strong resemblance of Ida, of her grandmother. It's very inspirational to see these genetics, and how she is now managing the school. So Charity is here in the picture, and her parents are on the bottom left. And you can see, so it's Frances Wetzel, and mother's last name was Reedy. And that's where Singer Glen Cemetery, Reedy was buried, as you can see photoed here. And you can tell that here at this manual hand shapes, it's not necessarily American Sign Language alphabet. This was printed in 1923. But throughout the years, I mean, years even before, coming from a place where the language was brought over from Europe and families from Germany, in both Amish and Mennonites and Dunkard, and so on and so forth with that lineage. And it was a profoundly strong German church, and their communications was based off of sign language. And because this had hearing people there, they were unable to communicate with them. So they ended up creating their own manual alphabet with both hands. So this is validation that tells a story of how it happened. I have interviewed many of those who remember this form of sign language, whereas before it was passed over through residential schools.
So you can see here in the image here, that is who I recall telling the story about being married and having descendants with Charity, who's now the superintendent. So I was able to borrow this book of their family history, the David Holler Family History book, and it's the red book pictured here on the slide. And Francis was able to go through the pages and really dig in and do the research to investigate and confirm some of these family stories and realize that there were, in fact, some mistakes made by the author. She was able to identify individuals in the record who were, in fact, deaf, and she was able to see penned into the margins who was deaf and who wasn't. And there is some cultural knowledge passed down throughout the generations, helping us identify who was deaf and who was hard of hearing. And this information was passed down from generation to generation, yet they were not identified correctly on the census records. So when they were asked by the census takers whether they were deaf or not, often it was, incorrectly recorded because of ambiguous answers. But because of the passed down knowledge and insider knowledge written down in these family history books, it was tremendously helpful in identifying who was deaf in the records. And there are the other image is a deaf marriage census record. Um, made by the Census Bureau to identify marriage records, and this was another tremendously helpful resource in the archives as I was doing my research to identify family relations and connections. So I am so happy that this project was done and these records were made during this period of history from like the 80s and the 90s. Um, from about 1880 to about 1900, these records were made as the census recorded these families and how many children they have, how many deaf children, what schools did they go to, who their parents were, and etc. This type of information. And you might see the underlined a section. It's hard to see, but the underlined area near the top has two names that are underlined. And what that meant was that they were deaf. That was a code to identify that they were deaf. There was no word for deaf, it just underlined as a symbol. So these types of clues, as I gathered the data, helped me identify individuals and investigate the genealogy here. And these are all scanned and available and ready to look at, which was very exciting during the course of the research. And so to find these connections, to see who were deaf cousins and tie it all back to the Lantz Mill shared signing community. So here's another exciting connection between Rockingham and Shenandoah counties. You'll see a publication in the Shenandoah history, which I found a book there. And I believe that the book tells the story of Shenandoah County in general. I don't recall exactly what the topic was, but I found the picture within this publication, and there were two different chairs pictured. One is the rocking chair, and the other one on the right is a like a regular chair that doesn't rock. And these were passed down through the Christensen family, and these were made by the Christensen furniture woodshop workers. And I can't confirm whether this went through the School for the Deaf, but it's interesting to look at. There are similarities in the waves at the top that are carved at the top. The image is cut off, unfortunately, so you can't see it, but there is a iconic, distinctive wavy shape that was crafted into these chairs. It is the signature of these chairs. At the time, there were classic mass-produced chairs with very simple, standard flat tops. But the Christensen family specialized in producing these handcrafted chairs with a unique style. So it's very inspiring to see examples of these family-made chairs and furnishings. And they were passed down from generation to generation. Families had specific cabinetry and cedar furniture, and they were no longer deaf families, but they had informed me that these were Christensen furniture items made. And there was also a small cedar chest was one of the items um, with and it's where they stored a variety of family hand-me-downs. And that is another example of something made by them. In the middle is an old, grainy, washed out image of the Lantz Mill village, and you can see the mill actually pictured in it. In the top background of the image, you see that building that we saw earlier on the cliff. And then the right, you see Joseph Lamb and Mary Elizabeth Haller. And that they have a connection to Francis, who I mentioned earlier. Her husband was related to Ida, and they had a connection via Lantz Mills, and they were actually cousins. And so what that meant was that they could be carriers of the connection 26 gene, which is one of the genes for hereditary deafness. And we can't know for certain, we'll never know for sure. We don't have their DNA, but it's likely the case. So, a little bit of information about the preservation of artifacts and the ethics of it. Um, Whether it be whatever the artifact may be, it's important to inform places like the Shenandoah Public Library in Edinburgh. They do have archives related to the Lance Mill town. So they have information about it. And people, researchers from all over who look into this topic would be going there. It's sort of similar to a famous example of Martha's Vineyard, which is the famous example of a deaf shared signing community. Um, and there was about 40% before the 1880s there who had attended school who were known to be deaf in that area. And so that's where they coined the term deaf village. And people outside of that town might have known some sign language, but it's not able to be confirmed. So people assume that Martha's Vineyard was the only place where everyone knew sign language. But in fact, the research has shown that there were other shared signing communities and villages just like it in Oregon, in Lantz Mill, and in other places I have investigated and researched to find more in-depth knowledge. I will be learning more about the Ohio project. It's in the early stages now of researching it, but Lance Mill has a strong connection to this Ohio shared signing community, despite the large geographical distance. So really fascinating and interesting to see how the family tree, starting here in Virginia, quite spread out throughout the country. Another valuable resource for this type of research is cemeteries. The cemeteries are a valuable source of information, and there's a lot to be identified there and found out. Um, because often those who lived together or were buried together, and I've identified at least 10 deaf individuals who were buried in the other cemetery. And the Lance Mill Cemetery has at least 37 deaf individuals. I'm counting two separate cemeteries nearby. One was the Singer's Glen, but that has not yet had a confirmed number that requires more investigation to conclusively tell how many. There's a long way to go on that research, but the point being, we find these documents and we validate it as proof by comparing it to the family and the cultural knowledge that's passed down from generation to generation. There are many contradicting accounts. We would hear stories about name signs that were passed down, and this rich oral tradition of passing these stories on um, would include some of these example signs that aren't standard to American Sign Language. I'm giving some examples right now, which were name signs used back then, and these are important to be documented for now and for posterity in the future. So, uh, adding these to the collections and the archives, um, as I mentioned earlier, is really valuable. And the Encyclopedia of Virginia is now including some of these archives and these resources, which is really important. And the encyclopedia has been able to, you can use that to identify, um, museums and classes and other researchers as well. So that's how we can start to form connections among the research community. So it was mentioned earlier, my two publications, one about the Baltimore Deaf Heritage and one about the Detroit. Um, these are all through Arcadia Publishing. You can order the books there on the website. And I'd like to mention it's really important to support authors directly by purchasing directly instead of going through Amazon. So I do encourage you to go direct to the publishing company and order through their website. You'll also see in the top the 250th anniversary of Shenandoah County booklet. Um, and this is one chapter in the booklet is a chapter about the shared signing community that I researched. And you can get that at the shenandoahhistory.org through the Shenandoah History Museum. And the archives can also point you in the right direction. In Edinburgh Mill, there's a restaurant with an inn upstairs. They have it for sale in person. Feel free to contact them to get more information about it. There are 12 different chapters included, but the research I did about deaf history is included as one of the 12 chapters. On the bottom right of the slide, you see an amazing drawing painting by an artist who specializes in that style. And I was able to work with her um, to get this drawing of the big house that used to be located on the high bluffs in Lantz Mill. That's where the family lived who ran the farm. This was a 13-room house. And there's many stories, including one published in a newspaper that specifically identifies and mentions a 13-room house. And you can imagine how large the family was, having five sons and all of their extended family included, all working together to run this family-owned farm and business and pass it down from generation to generation. And you can buy this through ellamansfield.com. She is the artist. And you'll look under prints and you'll be able to find this as a poster and you can proudly display it in a library or a museum or post it um, to see more about the Lantz Mill Deaf Shared Signing Community. So please follow on Instagram and Facebook. And you can follow both Heritage ASL and you'll see a variety of different stories that are posted often. Also, feel free to email me with more information, or if you'd like to invite me to provide a talk for any other event, my email is heritageasl, Kathleen at heritageasl.org. With that, I welcome you to ask your questions. And Penny, how should we go about question and answer?
I am looking for questions. I don't see anything new at the moment. So I'm
If
going to
there's a
say,
deaf person, a signer, you'll have to spotlight them if they're wanting to contribute through sign language. Or you could go ahead and just maybe perhaps remove this feature and go with a gallery view by looking at the other participants.
well, I
So
was
do we
hopeful
want
that they
to,
could
if you
type.
want to remove the host feature, say again, Penny?
I was hoping that everybody would be able to type and then we could read.
Okay,
Does that
okay.
work?
That's
Okay. I mean, I promised everybody that they would not be seen.
sorry, Penny. Give me just a moment. I need to make sure she's. Go ahead, Penny.
I did tell people that this would be recorded and they would not be seen.
Okay,
I am,
that's fine. So we can go ahead with the questions then, please. Could could you
so
record the questions, or excuse me, if you can say the questions and the interpreter sign them?
here is a question. How long did it take for you to find all of the information? And what makes you want to do this project?
That's a very good question. So it started around 2017 when I had done a DNA through Ancestry, and I never had intentions to do any research on this until the DNA came, and I was shocked to learn about several cousins that were deaf because both of my daughters are hard of hearing, and so I started to wonder and get curious and learn that through distance on my father's side, who is from Virginia, and my mother, who's currently in Chicago, they both of their birth parents. My father's birth, my grandfather, in other words, passed away in 2009, and was an avid writer for the deaf in Virginia. And from there, I just immersed myself and never looked back. Because I had learned through that there was a lot of gaps in that information. And I realized that I had thought about how there was a lot of information out there with deaf history. So that's what made me roll up my sleeves and do the work to fill in those gaps and that missing information. So I brought that over to share with the public.
Another one is about the prints in the artist's print and wondering if the bridge to the house is still extant. Is it still there?
It is. It's a beautiful bridge. You can see that on the Heritage ASL Facebook. You'll see if you click on Lantz Mills, there's several videos that document the bridge. It's a very beautiful bridge. It starts at the lower land and then makes its way over to the high bluff. And I had the opportunity to walk on that bridge, and it truly swings. I mean, it was swinging left and right, back and forth. And people had warned me that the bridge swung. And so you can see as I'm signing in ASL that it swings, and it sounded scary. So when I went to go see, I could feel the stability of the bridge, and it rocks more than anything. And so, and you can't have a lot of people at the same time walking across it, maybe no more than three. And it is from the lower land to the high bluff, and it's a very beautiful bridge over the creek. And I encourage you to go and take a look.
Wonderful. The next says, how did you start researching about the shared signing villages? Is there a way to start researching about possible shared signing communities in the areas where we live?
Yes, so it is a huge challenge. It just doesn't happen in just one day. It takes several days, maybe perhaps even a couple years, for the deaf village, specifically Lantz Mills. Now, that took me several years to collect all of the information because I was overwhelmed with all of the deaf generations, all the deaf families. I had to really take a seat and a break, if you will, and try to analyze their backgrounds and who they were. I mean, you have to go through every individual, which then led me to Ohio because there was a family or a group with at least one deaf family that was from Shenandoah County that moved over to the Highlight County, which is out in Ohio. And the deaf community then expanded there, which was connected to the Lantz Mills. And because of that, the deaf family was originally their last name is Lantz, that had arrived and changed it to Lance, Lance. So it was obvious that they didn't know what their past generation, or to that point their heritage, was. It's possible that their spoken language, their accent may have changed, their written language may have changed, all based off of the last name Lance. And that was before the Ohio School for the Deaf, just as in Virginia, a school for the deaf, the deaf community had expanded there. So again, it takes years and years to collect and the cultural knowledge.
We have two questions which reference the terminology of a signing community, a shared signing community, and deaf villages. And one feels that the connection between Shenandoah in Shenandoah is a little ambiguous. Can we
Mhm.
sort of, and what is the difference between the Lantz Mill village and
So,
Martha's village?
right. So there's been some discussion. And in my perspective, I feel that it is the same as the deaf village, the signing community or shared signing communities versus a deaf village is the same. There are large deaf communities that are not considered a shared signing community. There is a difference between the two. So now that we have a large deaf community out in Frederick, Maryland, we have out in Arlington, Texas, in Riverside, California, throughout the nation. But the high percentage of hearing folks don't realize that it's a shared signing. Or out in Ohio, you have such a small percentage. I mean, we're talking 0.001% compared to the hearing community. But yet still, it's considered as a large deaf community. We still have that. Whereas the shared signing community or deaf villages are both hearing and deaf merged and using the language.
So the next question circles back to Ohio and wondering if the connection could have been related to the migration of the Mennonites. And does Kathleen know when the Ohio community formed?
From my research, it was around 1814, sort of. It could be between 1812, maybe in the early 1800s to 1814. I know that one passed in 1814, so it's obvious that it was before that time. And you can see, now if we go back, now when we saw the Highlight County next to Shenandoah and Rockingham County, now over there, they had copied several of the names of those who arrived to Ohio out in Highlight County. And the same with Mauriestown. It sounded the same as Moorestown out in Ohio County. So the accents were similar. And then you have Edinburgh. And then you saw the Ellenstown out in Ohio was probably what sounds like Hollowstown versus Holler. And the Holler family was based in Shenandoah County. Sounds like Hollow. So we were able to catch that through publications, through writings, that Hollow, what then sounded like Holler. And Hollowtown was then established, and maybe because they were unable to document it accordingly, or if there was difficulty with producing it based off of their accent. So it was before the Ohio School for the Deaf was established. And there was publications that stated that there were 16 deaf uneducated individuals based near Dayton. And so, because of that, that's what then initiated the establishment for the deaf school out in Ohio. It was the beginning before the Ohio School for the Deaf was established. So, based off of that, they then created this school for these 16 deaf individuals.
So is Rochester, New York considered a signing community?
No, nope. So it's considered a deaf community because there's a high percentage of hearing individuals there. And a fun fact, 2 weeks ago at Lamar University, there was in Beaumont, Texas. It's much bigger than Rochester, but yet Rochester has a large deaf community. They do, that is true, but it's not both hearing and deaf signers there. So does that make sense?
We'll find out. Here's a question.
Sure thing.
Are there other researchers like you throughout the country? It seems like such a great opportunity to uncover these hidden stories.
Yes, yes. It takes a village to find information. And so that's why I'm hoping to expand and invite more researchers to join this as a team because I cannot be the only one to do this. I can't be alone. It's not a one-woman show. I do feel that, but I want to be able to invite others. But people do feel overwhelmed during the research process. And maybe it's because I've got this encyclopedia that lives in my head. So I'm trying to get that out, to deposit it in order to make me feel better. It feels better to share information rather than to hold it all in my head. And so sometimes, I feel like I might just drop based off of exhaustion and having all this information.
So back to the Lantz Mill village. I think the question is, did any if any of the deaf people went to the American School of the Deaf, or did they already have deaf private school before 1816?
Yes. Now, that is my favorite answer is yes. In Virginia, they are in Virginia, in Goochland, Virginia. They opened their doors from 1812 to 1821. And there were four different locations. The first one was at Goochland. And you can go over to Goochland and see that there is a history marker there. It's right there, and it says the power of deaf education. And you can't miss it. It's right there. But yet, a lot of people oversee it. They don't see it. And I argue that the three deaf students that were at the school went to the American School for the Deaf. So, which means you have to say American School for the Deaf, and that it is the second deaf school in the United States.
I don't see any more why did they move to Ohio? Job opportunity?
So, if you recall, back at that time, there were many folks searching for homesteads, places to settle. And likely these might be for religious reasons, for marriage reasons, etc. Perhaps families break apart and part of them move up north searching for fertile farmland. And so often other parts of the family would choose to stay. You have a variety of reasons in the record why we see people move for these reasons. There's also a variety of religious reasons why people would move to Ohio.
Okay. Before we close, we'll just wait a minute, but I want to let Kathleen know that there's been a request to see one of the slides again, the one that showed the historic sign names from the community. It says
I
there were,
don't believe there was actual sign names on the slides, but if you look at me, Kathleen, I will sign them for you. Here is Christensen, or rather Christian, the Christian last name has a sign name. And let me back up a little bit. It's actually interesting. Deaf folks today typically have a sign name related to their first name, not their surname. But historically, it was surnames or last names that received a unique sign to identify them. And so the Christian family had the letter C near the nose. This sign was for the Holler family with the index and middle finger bent along the side of the cheek. And that's an interesting story. There was one of the family members who was riding on a horse, fell off, and got a scar right on their jawline from hitting a fence. And ever since then, that has become the Holler family name sign. There's also this sign that I'm showing right now. And that was for Horace. Some people would say there's another name sign that looked like JJ. Um, so these are some examples that you can only learn by listening to the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation and passed down through sign language because these aren't documented in any written form. So there is money being raised actually to go and video record some of these heritage stories and preserve them for the archives.
I find that fascinating. That's amazing.
Sorry
There
to interrupt.
is,
This is Jeremy. I'm one of the helpers with Rocktown History. And there was another comment that came in from Charity Waragon, who was one of the people that was featured in your presentation, and she is in attendance tonight.
Hi,
She
Charity.
says,
Hi.
"Great seeing you, Kathleen." And she also wants to note that there were several Christians in the Harrisonburg area, and they were also deaf. Their names were Clarence, Shelby, Willie, Leroy, and a few others.
Yes, yes, that is true. There are so many connections between Rockingham and Shenandoah County. It's overwhelming how many connections there are as you research these deaf families.
and the last question that I see is, can you show a few hand shapes alphabets? I guess it was that picture from the PowerPoint, not ASL.
Yeah, yeah. So really, I can demonstrate with my hands. Do you mind if I just sign them to demonstrate? I'll show you. So here's the letter A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, J, K. Now I'm working from memory. I had to practice to learn these. There's K, L, M, N, O, or O over the I, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. And this is the old version of the letter C. And I'm proud to be among, the deaf group that use this letter, this sign for the letter Z. Um, and then there was another version of the letter Z that could be signed with two hands. There's so many different variations on the letter Z specifically. And there is in 1820, or excuse me, 1923, there is a publication from John Walter Michaels, who graduated in 1868, um, which is right after the Civil War. And there's a little, diagram showing these manual alphabet hand shapes. And so you can also see some regional signs that are identifiable to Virginia that were brought to Arkansas. For example, the sign for a store that you would go to buy something from looks like this. So there was store and cousins looked like this, with both index fingers coming together. And these are signs originating in Virginia that have since spread to Arkansas as a result of the history. And we have the documentation to prove it from 1923, where it was published. And it's also easy to search for J.W. Michaels. You'll be able to, and then the number 1923, Handbook of Sign Language, and you'll find more information. J.W. Michaels.
So one of the comments says it's fascinating to see the similarity of those hand-shaped signs to the British Sign Language. And somebody else mentioned, the same
Yes,
thing.
so the British manual alphabet has a mix, rather the Lantz Mill has a mix of British Sign Language kind of mixed in with it, with the other sources.
Well, this
So
this
perfect.
has
I want to
been
say thank you. Thank you everyone for attending and watching. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email me. Again, that's Kathleen at heritageasl.org. And if for any reason you can't find the email address, you can also find me on Facebook or Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me. And you can reach out through the Heritage ASL account as well. If you'd like to have me come speak at your event, I'd be happy to come give a talk as well. Let me know.
Well, you're getting
Thank
lots
you
of
all.
thank yous in the comments, lots of exclamation points, and
Thank you so much. And Charity, good. I'm happy to see you. Happy that you're here. Thank you.
this has been a wonderful presentation. And I want to thank everybody. Well, we should all be giving our round of applause to Kathleen. And thank you for bringing such a rich and interesting and unknown history from the area to us. We certainly wish you all the best in your research, and perhaps you've found some help this evening. I know that I'm ready to make sure we have these stories in our library as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I am happy to send out some articles for you to include in your library if you'd want.
Thank you. And to our general audience, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm so glad that you could stay in your cozy homes because I'll be driving home in a very cold car. If you enjoyed this program, I hope that you will look at rocktownhistory.org and see what's coming up. We try to make our third Thursday talks hybrid at least so that people can be in person and online. Next month, we'll be hearing about the Valley Frontier. Doretta Sobolewski will discuss the European migration and settlement in the Valley during the 1700s. And I wouldn't be doing my job as a director if I didn't let people know that donations are always welcome. We keep our programs accessible by keeping them free. So if you go to rocktownhistory.org, you can become a member and support us in that way, or just there's a bright orange donation button. So we'd appreciate your support. And certainly you can be an ambassador by sharing with your friends.
And this is
Um,
Kathleen. I just real quickly wanted to say something as well. Please do visit the Virginia School for the Deaf in Stanton, Virginia. They have a wonderful museum and exhibit there. Exhibits on a variety of information. Please do go stop by. They also have archives.
that's great. That's great. Yes. Now we all want to take a field trip. I guess that we want to thank those interpreters. So certainly appreciate your help today. And I want to suggest that everybody just stay curious and support your local history. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you all so much.